The crisis that brought you into this story on August 9th didn't begin with Mike Brown, obviously. I actually grew up in the same areas and actually went to the same schools and graduated from that same high school that he did and his father did. His father actually graduated maybe a few years after I did. The conditions that, in his case specifically, resulted in his murder are the same conditions that I grew up in. St. Louis is one of the most polarized cities in the country. You can obviously see when you drive through. And the way Ferguson is situated, it's like in an outer ring that is just at like that first initial wave of white flight. But my experience, I imagine, is no different than Mike Brown Sr. or Mike Brown Jr.'s experience. During middle school, I would walk up and down Natural Bridge Road to go back and forth to school. And walking home, just like you experienced stop and frisk here, the same thing was happening to us at the age of 12 and 13 years old. Meaning we'd be walking home from school, not cutting through anyone's yard, not being run out of a store, but walking home, book bags, books in hand, and police will pull you over as you're walking. They'll throw you up against the car, they'll throw you down on the ground, spread eagle, empty your bags out, and it's something you became accustomed to. I've heard people describe it now, and as I got older, it made more sense that where we grew up really was like fields of almost like mini plantations, because the way that the area is situated, you have a core that is the city proper. External to that, you have a county, which begins those outer rings where everybody else has moved to. And inside of the county, there are multiple separate jurisdictions. Each one like Ferguson, like Northwoods where I grew up, like Delta City, like Pine Lawn, like Bell Ridge, would only be so big, but every time you cross into a different jurisdiction, you're dealing with a different set of police. And which means that, let's say they find or make up a reason to stop you. At one end of Natural Bridge, you get stopped. They write you a ticket if they don't take you in. By the time you've gone another mile, you're in another jurisdiction, which means that you're subject to the same risk, again, of getting written up, getting a ticket. Now, normally what's happened is, because of the way they do fines, you get penalized. And then if you can't pay it, you're subject to either higher fines or possible jail times, in which case they put out a warrant. So let's say you're situated in this community, now you have a warrant and something going wrong with your vehicle that you can't afford to fix, which makes you a roaming target. For us, it was normality. It didn't strike us, well, I'll say it struck some of us as outrageous. Growing up in it, it didn't strike me as outrageous, it struck me as normal. So it's like you become accustomed to it. And unless you either go through some politicizing experience, you don't know different. Now, we're really just still brushing kind of the surface of the roots of all this stuff in St. Louis. St. Louis, Clarence Lake is someone, he actually spent some time as a member of the Organization for Black Struggle. He also is, I think he's now at the University of Kansas. But he's done a lot of writing on movement history, especially like in Missouri and in the Midwest. And when Ferguson went down, he talked about St. Louis as being a long-term lab for racial segregation, because there's a history of St. Louis experimenting. First, in the earlier part of the 20th century, they actually ran like a ballot initiative specifically to get racial covenants. And then when that was ruled illegal, they came back and created different forms. So it's like they have been mastering this process of excluding and polarizing communities for more than a generation. When we talk about this tapestry of neighborhoods, that's how it happened. They kept creating different neighborhoods so that not only would be able to create their own laws, but they'd be able to extract their own tax dollars, their own fines. it is in that circumstance that Michael Brown was killed.